It took me a long time to warm up to Bleach's head captain Yamamoto, but with how he's been used throughout the series, it's kind of been impossible not to. In fact, I'd say at this point I'm more than warmed up. I'm melting because it's like 15 million degrees in here from the sheer hype and badassery that the old man puts on display time and time again. But for real, what a fulfilling journey it's been to go from strongly opposing and disliking a character to eventually gaining so much respect and getting so excited when he fights. And if his character has to end, it was a hell of an end to have. So let's talk about it. Throughout Bleach, head captain Yamamoto, for better or worse, has been this stony, unshakable, and harsh man that's mostly shown nothing but resolute certainty in his decisions and an unwavering strength even in the worst of times. He was distant, as many bosses are, a figure of authority that usually didn't approve of our main protagonist. But there's been something else lately as well. Yamamoto throughout this arc has been sullen and even more dour than usual, like he feels his age is catching up with him, or perhaps just the actions of his past. He's been fittingly grim from the threat that our heroes are up against, a threat that he's apparently very familiar with. In some ways, old ghosts are coming back to haunt our head captain, shadows of the past that he can't dispel with his fire alone. From the moment those Quincy's entered his office, Yamamoto has had to wrestle with the fact that an enemy from long ago is back and maybe even more threatening than before, something that was made very clear when they immediately murdered his lieutenant in front of him. Because despite his power, Yamamoto was unable to do anything about them, and that's grounded him more to me as a reader. His position, his authority, none of that mattered. He's just a person trying his best against something scary and difficult. He's felt more human in this arc in a lot of ways than he ever has before in the rest of the series. Throughout the other arcs, Yamamoto has remained this unshakable force, which could sometimes make him a frustrating antagonist, or even a respected ally in my eyes, depending. It was that stubborn, authoritative single-mindedness that put him so low on my initial captain ranking, only to make a large leap in the following list after seeing how badass he was during the Karakura Town battle, and more of what he's willing to do, and why, for the greater good. His frequent tunnel vision and determination to do things his way went from aggravating to me just being so happy he was on our side, you know? But throughout all of that, he never seemed vulnerable, at least not emotionally. I didn't really see the man beneath the giant mustache, and instead only saw the powerful being holding such a high position and being the kind of face of the Soul Society. If he had doubts or if he had worries, he didn't show them, not until the Quincy's came back, and even then, he only allowed small flickers of vulnerability to shine through. I think of his silence at Chojiro's funeral, of the feeling of quiet grief and simmering rage while everyone else could only look on. It was a powerful moment just before he appropriately had the pyre set on fire, saying goodbye to such an old friend and trusted lieutenant. And speaking of that, I know I've given Chojiro a lot of grief over not really knowing him, but Kubo, a little frustratingly, has made me kind of eat my own words about Chojiro post-mortem, including giving us a closer look at his past with Yamamoto. I love that he was the one that gave him one of those head scars, and I loved Chojiro's determination to serve him, something that he ended up doing for a very, very long time. We may not have been given an extensive history between them, but there's been more than enough shown now how Yamamoto really cared so much about his old friend, and that his death at the hands of the Quincy profoundly affected him, because at the heart of all of his silent stares and contemplative spectating, I think Yamamoto this arc has just been struggling with guilt. Because how could he not be? I don't know the full story yet about what happened 1,000 years ago, but we know he fought Yuabaha, and the outcome of their battle ended with both of them still being alive. It's not clear yet if Yuabaha escaped or if Yamamoto spared him for some reason, but whatever the case, he didn't finish him off. Something that Mayuri pointed out was a massive mistake that has come back to haunt them, and I'm sure Yamamoto has been thinking the same. All of this destruction and the death of his fellow Soul Reapers may have been avoided if he had killed the Quincy King back then. I'm sure that's been weighing on him. He's not the type of guy to say it aloud, but you can feel it in the actions he's taking throughout the arc and through his demeanor throughout this whole part of the story. He's angry, he's sad, he's determined, and he's focused on trying to put an end to this once and for all. I absolutely loved that he was given the chance to at least avenge Chojuro by killing his murderer. That was fantastic, especially after Yamamoto just tanked Chojuro's stolen Bankai, having felt the sting of the real deal before. Speaking of which, is this just Yamamoto being badass and, making a mockery of the Quincy, or is this showing that the stolen Bankais aren't as effective as the original thing? I'm not sure, but either way, it was a fitting way to get justice for his fallen lieutenant, and I think an important little victory to give him in the story before his next bout. And even I felt inspired with the second wind everyone got when Yamamoto launched himself across the battlefield and made his presence known. His conviction trickled down to all of his subordinates and helped them keep fighting, even against nearly impossible odds. It was inspiring and really showed the deep level of admiration they all have for him in what turned out to be his final charge in a way, diving headfirst into danger to try to cut the head off the snake. A small flicker of hope that hopefully could spread into a wildfire. And then the face-off as Yamamoto came down like a meteor just in time to save Kenpachi. I talked about it a bit last video, but Kenny being beaten so easily by our new big bad is a great way to establish his power and the threat that he poses. It's no secret that Kenpachi is incredibly strong, like an absolute freak of nature, so if even he can be beaten so easily, it doesn't bode well for most other people. It's a classic story technique to take out a strong character, to immediately make the new villains seem more threatening, and it often works very well, here included. Because after seeing that, it really feels like maybe Old Man Yama is the only one on that guy's level. But in the back of my mind, I've been resigned to the fact that there's no way the main villain of this arc is getting beaten before Ichigo even gets here. Unless something crazy happened, like one of the other Quincy turned out to actually be the big bad and Yuabaha was just a red herring that could be beaten by Yamamoto, I knew that the head captain probably wasn't gonna really win. Maybe he'd drive the enemies away for now, but more likely he wasn't getting out of this. There's been plenty of foreshadowing towards that conclusion, and with how this battle has gone, there was a very high chance Yamamoto wasn't gonna be victorious. The prospect of this fight was exciting though, because this is a rematch on a grand scale over a huge amount of time, and I also love the feeling of the two old leaders squaring off. They both inspire their troops just by being there, and they're both like the most experienced and powerful in their respective groups. In some ways it was giving like Yoda versus Palpatine, just these powerful grandmasters facing off, with the lives of everyone that follows them on the line. And once the fight gets going, especially with the crazy combat additions that the anime made, that was insane, it becomes this intense duel with the world burning all around them, where they're both reminded of their first fight all that time ago, which was another aspect that the anime handled so well, flipping between perception of the past and the present repeatedly. It was really interesting, really cool. I love the way it gave us an insight into how these two men are feeling about all this. I just adored that because it really captured the feeling of how much has changed and yet how much has stayed the same, like this conflict that's been reignited after a millennium, where the combatants may not be exactly as they were, but that same battle is raging on. From the very beginning, back when we met him in the Soul Society arc, I knew the head captain was going to be powerful, obviously. Not only was he introduced as the man leading the Soul Society squads, but he also exists within the boundaries of anime rules, where elderly men are usually always much more powerful than they may initially appear. And it didn't take long to get some glimpses of his power, but I had to wait very patiently to see what he could actually do. And while I've been so curious about his true power and his Bankai, it was worth the wait. I was so hyped when he said the word Bankai here, and I knew when I turned the page that I would finally see something I've been curious about for so long. The build up to it was so beautiful and tense as well, as we saw every bit of moisture around them suddenly sucked away by an incredible heat wave. Lips were cracking, vases were emptying, and even a certain stolen ice Bankai stopped working entirely. It was such a great setup, like a last dry breath before actually seeing what the Bankai could do. I have talked multiple times about my theory that this Bankai would somehow be him going like supernova and have like the power of a sun, and while that turned out to not entirely be true, I wasn't entirely off either. His Bankai has a few different aspects, and one of them was pretty much what I was hoping for in regards to the sun. But there was much more to his Bankai, including something I could never, ever have predicted. Sure, he's got overwhelming fire and crippling heat, but there's a whole other crazy part of all of this. Yamamoto's blade can raise legions of the dead to fight for him. Yeah, I was blown away by that. I'm a little biased because I played a necromancer in my first years-long D&D campaign, and I have an affinity for undead armies and stories, but this was so cool and right up my alley and so metal visually, with these hordes of skeletons grabbing at Yamamoto and stacking on each other to become shields for their master. It was all just creepy and great and badass, and the movements of the skeletons and the silence of their arrival in the anime really helped bolster that sequence. It was much more horrifying than expected, but still brought the power you would imagine the head captain to have. And I loved that it wasn't just random dead people he was raising from the grave, but instead the victims that fell to his sword over all the many years that he's been around, including the Quincy King's subordinates from 1,000 years ago, which was pretty disturbing mental and emotional warfare, but damn, I respect Yamamoto's game. That's how you get to your opponent. You really mess with them by forcing them to crush their own dead allies. And I liked the little passing implication that Yamamoto made about a Soul Reaper wielding the undead like this, because it does seem to be a little sacrilegious and hypocritical, doesn't it, for Yamamoto to be using souls of the dead as his soldiers when a Reaper is usually helping guide souls to like a more peaceful rest, a different kind of afterlife. I thought that was an interesting moment, but I think it helps show just how desperate this situation is. Like, he's willing to do some really messed up stuff if it means getting rid of this threat. I was just floored by this Bankai, and of the ones that we've seen so far, I think honestly this might be my personal favorite. I'm completely biased because this is like right up my alley, and I love how unexpected it was, and it seemed to be more than enough to do some real damage to the Quincy King. It was very surprising watching him get cut down, but I knew in my gut that he couldn't actually be dead. Again, I never once thought Old Man Yama was gonna be the one to kill the new main villain. No, that never felt right, so I knew it couldn't be true. And sure enough, it wasn't. But even though I had a feeling Yamamoto was gonna come out of the fight alive, I was very surprised about how he actually pulled that off. Because it turns out, he hadn't even been there. This fight, while it sure looked like Yamamoto versus Yamamoto, the man Yamamoto was fighting was not His Majesty. Sure, he had his personality and his memories and apparently even some of his skills, but it wasn't perfect, but close enough. No, it turned out that the Yamamoto we've been seeing was nothing more than a fake, a pretender, an imposter. The Quincy King just Queen Amidala'd me. Straight up, he used a decoy, but it wasn't Keira Knightley, it was Royd. Twin brother of shapeshifter Lloyd that Kenpachi killed, who took on the shape and memories of his boss in order to have Yamamoto waste all of his power fighting an imposter. So while it feels like this was a fight between the two, it was really Yamamoto versus Lloyd. Or was it Royd? I forget. Terrible name. Two terrible names for those children. Their parents should be ashamed. But if he has all of Yamamoto's memories and personality, it really is kind of him anyway, in a weird way. Like, not technically, I suppose, but let's not get too philosophical on identity in life, but it was very interesting and disturbing the lengths that these Sternritter will go to please their majesty. Royd was just a sacrifice, and he seemed perfectly happy and honored to do that for his king. And the second Yamamoto tried to use his Bankai again, it was captured in one of those medallions. So that's not good. That's not good at all. Our big bad can now summon an army of dead people that he's killed, and I'm sure that's a pretty long list. Yamamoto is clearly an excellent strategist, much like how Aizen had to have a special soldier specifically designed to neutralize Yamamoto. Yamamoto had one of his soldiers wear the head captain down, have him reveal the nature of his Bankai, and hold him off until Yamamoto's business was done. As for what he was doing while this was happening, he was in the Soul Society's prison beneath the First Company barracks, where he was paying Sosuke Aizen a visit. Just hearing that set off many, many alarms in my body, and while the manga only had him tell Yamamoto about this, the anime added a whole extra scene where we got to really see the conversation, and what a fascinating chat that was. Here we have two of the biggest villains in the series meeting, and as expected, Aizen is apparently aware of Yuabaha, because of course he knows about him. He's Aizen. There's very little he doesn't know. I brought that up before. Of course he knows about these guys. But it's amazing just how intimidating and somehow still powerful Aizen felt, even with his powers sealed and contained. It was scary to note that even though his powers are sealed, there's no question that he's still this incredibly powerful Hogyoku-infused individual that's too powerful for Yuabaha to spend time even trying to kill, because it would be very difficult to pull off, just like we saw before. Like, to me, yes, they have Aizen contained, they have him imprisoned, but clearly it's like bottling a hurricane. I expect at some point this guy's gonna get out, somehow, some way, but not this way. This conversation reveals that Aizen is another one of the 5 special threats that the Vandenreich have, and I called this one too. It just made too much sense. Like, of course Aizen's a threat, whether it's his strategic prowess, or what he knows, or his actual power. So it's him, Ichigo, and Kenpachi are 3 of the 5. I guessed Ichigo and I guessed Aizen, and in my manga read-along on my Patreon, I did originally guess Kenpachi. The other guesses I officially had, I believe, were Mayuri, the Soul King, and there was someone else. Maybe I'll put the name on here. Anyway, despite being one of those threats, the Quincy King didn't try to kill Aizen, but instead offered him a place in the Vandenreich. Rather than go through the hassle of trying to kill Aizen when he's like kind of very adaptable and unkillable, recruiting him would have neutralized him in a different way, and of course would add another powerful soldier to his ranks. And it's kind of wild to think about what would have happened if this actually went that way and Aizen joined forces with the Vandenreich like Yuabaha wanted. They've already proven to be a massive problem, so adding Aizen to the mix would have been just catastrophic for the Soul Reapers. And that was Yuabaha's pitch, saying that they both had a common enemy and they wanted the destruction of the Soul Society. Though I honestly imagine that it wouldn't be long until Aizen tried to assume the Quincy's throne. It wouldn't be the first time he usurped a king. But Aizen's refusal to join is interesting because he's in a position that's not exactly ideal right now, where many people would probably take whatever chance they could get to be free. Like, he could have said sure and then left the second he was broken out. Or like I said, he could have tried to take over the Vandenreich, but he declined altogether rather than give himself any of those opportunities and escape. It's Aizen, so I'm sure he's got some angle he's working that I just can't imagine. He's smarter than me. We've established this plenty of times. So I'm sure he's figured something out that I'm like completely blind to. But I'm glad he declined to join the Vandenreich, purely because I really want to see him have a team up with our heroes against the Vandenreich instead. Like, I love stuff like that. For example, Loki being freed from prison to help Thor was one of the only great things in Thor 2. Or every time Magneto gets freed from incarceration to begrudgingly team up with the X-Men. Things like that usually open the door for some fun interactions and new ways to examine the antagonist, so I'm hoping for something like that, or at least a Hannibal Lecter consultant role from behind bars. That all seems much more possible now after this, knowing that he's aware of our new enemy, is one of the special threats, and had no interest in doing a supervillain team-up. While villains joining forces could have been fun in its own right, so often the reasoning behind those alliances are like super paper thin, you know? Like, remember in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3 when Venom shows up in the 3rd act and says to Sandman, "You hate the spider, I hate the spider, let's have a team up." And it feels so forced as hell because Sandman should really be like, "What? I don't hate Spider-Man. I'm just trying to save my sick daughter. Also, who the hell are you and why do you look like Spider-Man?" But instead, he's just like, "Sure, let's team up." Okay. It's weird sometimes. But in this case, sure, they share a common goal, but that doesn't mean that they should work together, that they would be able to work together, because Aizen doesn't have any interest in serving anyone but himself. And if the heroes do have to work with him, like I want it to be something that benefits him where he doesn't lose his threat just because he's in an uneasy alliance. It's hard for me to watch former villains kind of lose their luster to suddenly become like super helpful and kind of docile. No, I want a team up where I'm scared of what he actually wants the entire time. I want a real uneasy alliance where the threat of Aizen and his goals is still very present despite the circumstances. Yeah, it was a crazy added on scene, and I know Kubo is like super involved with the anime, so him deciding to actually show that sequence I thought was really important, and I thought really effective, and I just loved it, and I'm so excited for all the possibilities with Aizen. But if this is all we get from him, it was very cool, but I doubt that it is. Kubo went through the trouble of reminding us that he's around, and I don't think he did that for no reason. Like, I don't think it'll happen, but Ichigo somehow making it to Soul Society only for Aizen to be the one person still alive would be wild. Like, just everyone's dead, and then Aizen's just cozy in his cell like, what did I miss? That would be crazy. I don't think it'll happen, but the whole, oh my god, that'd be terrible. Anyway, with his Bankai stolen and having been completely duped into thinking he won, Yamamoto is cut down by Yuabaha. I haven't read beyond that giant splash page, so maybe he bounces back. But I doubt it. This felt like a very fitting end for him. One that I have been expecting for a while, honestly, ever since there was talk of who might replace him someday. And besides, he fills the role of the old, powerful warrior that is sacrificed to help push those who remain forward. As for who could become the new head captain, well, I don't want to ponder that too much till I know who even is still around or if that position will even exist anymore. You know what I'm saying? I don't think it'll be Byakuya anymore. He was one of my top candidates. These chapters were incredible, and the episode was even better. It was a beautiful battle to behold and had the proper grandeur for the stakes between these two characters. And if this is Yamamoto's final hour, he shone brightly and brilliantly one last time before his flames have been doused. What a legend. The second most metal old man, only behind Christopher Lee. And that'll do it for now. It was a lot to take in, it was super hype. I felt like this video needed to be kind of a tribute to Yamamoto. You know, he was a powerful character who really won me over. And I think had some of the most badass moments in all of Bleach. Like I said, one of my favorite Bankai of all time. As always, thanks so much for watching. If you want to see the journey that leads into these analysis videos, I do a manga read along on my Patreon as well as react to the episodes over there. So yeah, I'm really, we're running out of Soul Reapers. And we just lost our leader. Things are looking bad. I can't wait to see what happens next. Until then, take care. Bye.